But upstairs, the forbidden room stood at the end of the hallway with the chain hanging loose. My mother had secured it only hours earlier. Now the brass handle was turning by itself. And from inside the room came the slow, unmistakable sound of a child laughing. None of us moved. My mother stood at the bottom of the staircase staring upward. Sarah was beside me, gripping my arm so tightly that her fingernails pressed through my shirt. The handle turned again, then stopped. The laughter stopped with it. For several seconds, the house was completely silent. My mother was the first to move. She walked into the kitchen, opened the drawer beside the sink, and removed a small key I had never seen before. Then she looked at Sarah and me. "Put your shoes on." There was something different in her voice. She was no longer trying to convince us that nothing was happening. She was afraid. And for the first time, she looked like someone who had finally accepted that hiding the truth had stopped protecting us. Sarah asked where we were going. My mother looked toward the staircase. "Somewhere I should have taken you years ago." We left the house less than 5 minutes later. My mother did not lock the front door. That frightened me. She had always checked every lock twice before leaving. That night, she simply walked away from the house and got into the car. As we pulled away, Sarah turned around in the passenger seat. One upstairs window was visible from the road. The window belonged to the forbidden room. There was no light inside, but Sarah kept staring at it. I knew from her expression that it was not nothing, but I did not ask again. My mother drove for almost 40 minutes without telling us where we were going. The roads became narrower. Streetlights disappeared. Eventually we turned onto an old road surrounded by trees. At the end stood a small house. A porch light was already on. An elderly man opened the door before we knocked. I recognized him. His name was Uncle Peter. He was my father's older brother. We had not seen him since the funeral. The moment he saw my mother, his expression changed. Then he looked at Sarah and me. "You waited too long," he said. My mother walked past him. "I know." Peter closed the door quickly behind us. For the first time in my life, I heard someone other than my mother speak openly about the room. He did not begin with the door. He began with Emily. Our sister had not died from an illness. That was the first lie. Emily was 7 when our parents took her on a family trip. Sarah and I had not been born yet. According to Peter, they stopped at a small roadside market during the journey home. Most of the stalls sold ordinary things. Old furniture. Children's toys. Emily saw a doll sitting on a table. It had red yarn hair. A pale cloth face. A blue dress. Nothing about it looked frightening. She wanted it immediately. My father apparently did not. Peter said my father later told him there was something about the woman selling it that made him uncomfortable. She never tried to convince them to buy it. She barely spoke. When Emily picked up the doll, the woman simply watched her. My father told Emily to put it back. She began crying. She had been asking for almost nothing during the trip, and my mother convinced him that it was only an old toy. So they bought it. Peter stopped talking. Sarah looked at my mother. "That's what was in the photograph." My mother nodded. The photograph we had found in her room. Emily sitting on the floor. Something torn away from her lap. The day we brought it home. That was the doll. But the strange things did not begin immediately. For several weeks, Emily carried it everywhere. She slept with it, ate with it beside her, even brought it downstairs when watching television. Then she began talking to someone. At first, my parents believed it was an imaginary friend. Emily said the girl who spoke to her lived inside the walls. She would sit on the floor outside her bedroom and whisper into the hallway. When my mother asked who she was talking to, Emily would say, "The girl who owns the doll." My father tried to take it away. The next morning it was back in Emily's bed. He threw it into the rubbish. It returned. He drove several miles from the house and left it beside a road. 2 days later, my mother found it sitting at the bottom of the staircase. Sarah looked at me. Neither of us spoke. We both remembered the music box, the object our mother had burned, the object that had returned to Sarah's room. Peter continued. My parents tried moving. That was something neither of us had ever known. They rented another house in another town. For 3 nights, everything was normal. On the 4th morning, Emily woke them screaming. The doll was sitting beside her bed. My father drove the family back to the old house that same afternoon. I asked the obvious question. Why? Why return to the house where everything had begun? My mother answered, because it became worse when we left. She said that during those 4 days away, Emily barely slept. She heard someone walking through the new house at night. Doors opened by themselves. She woke with scratches across her bedroom wall. Not on her, on the wall. And every night she asked my parents to take her home. My father eventually realized something. Whatever had followed them appeared strongest whenever they tried to leave permanently. When they returned to our house, the disturbances became quieter. Not gone, quieter. So they stayed. That explained one question I had carried for years. Why not move? It was not because my parents loved that house. It was because they believed leaving made things worse. Peter stood and walked into another room. He returned carrying an old cassette recorder. He placed it on the table. My mother immediately looked away. Peter inserted a tape. Static filled the room. Then I heard my father's voice. He sounded younger, tired. He described noises from Emily's room, a knocking sound behind the walls, whispering after midnight. Then another voice appeared on the tape. Emily. She was laughing. My sister had been dead my entire life. I had never heard her voice before. Sarah began crying quietly beside me. On the recording, my father asked Emily who she was speaking to. Emily answered, "She says we have to give it back." My father's voice became quieter. "Give what back?" "The house." The recording ended. Peter removed the tape. I stared at him. "What does that mean?" He said nobody knew. Not completely. That was when my father decided the doll needed to be contained. He converted Emily's bedroom into the locked room at the end of the hallway. The windows were sealed. The mirrors were removed. The door was reinforced. The doll was placed inside. Emily was forbidden from entering. For several weeks, nothing happened. Then one night, my parents woke to find Emily missing. The chain on the room was still locked. The bolt was still in place, but Emily was inside. My mother stopped Peter. "I'll tell this part." Her voice shook. She said they found Emily sitting in the center of the room. The doll was in her lap. Emily was not frightened. She was humming. The same tune Sarah later heard from the music box. My father carried Emily out. That was the last night she behaved normally. Over the following days, she became weak. She stopped eating. She slept for hours at a time. Doctors could not identify anything that explained how quickly she was deteriorating. Then one morning, Emily did not wake up. Sarah asked whether the doll had killed her. My mother stared at the table. "I don't know." That answer surprised me. After everything, she still did not claim to know exactly what had happened. She only knew that whatever was connected to the doll had become part of their lives from the moment they brought it home. After Emily died, my father tried destroying it. Fire, water, breaking it apart. Nothing worked the way it should have. Sometimes it disappeared, then returned. Eventually, he placed it back inside Emily's room and locked the door permanently. Years passed. Sarah and I were born. For a while, the house remained quiet. My parents began to believe it was over. Then Sarah turned 7. The same age Emily had been when she died. That was when the knocking returned. The humming, the voice, and the doll began appearing outside the room again. My father's recordings became more frequent. He believed the thing behind the door was becoming interested in Sarah because she resembled Emily. That was why he replaced the chains. That was why he warned me never to answer voices in the hallway. And that was why he became obsessed with preventing Sarah from approaching the room. I asked about my father. Nobody answered immediately. Was his death really an accident? My mother looked at Peter, then at me. No. It happened one night while Sarah and I were asleep. My father heard Emily crying from inside the room. He had heard the voice many times before, but that night it said something different. It told him Emily was cold. My mother tried to stop him. He unlocked the chain, then the bolt, then the final lock. He entered alone. My mother waited outside. She heard him speaking, then shouting, then nothing. When he came out, he was carrying the doll. He told my mother they had to get it away from the house. He put it into the car. My mother went with him. They drove for miles. My father planned to take it somewhere far enough away that even if it returned, they might gain time. They never reached their destination. The car left the road. My father died. My mother survived. That was the accident. But there was one detail she had never told us. When she regained consciousness, the doll was gone. She returned home from the hospital 3 days later. It was sitting inside the forbidden room. Sarah whispered, "So Dad died trying to get rid of it?" My mother nodded. "And you've been keeping it locked in there ever since?" Another nod. I thought about the loose chain, the red yarn beneath Sarah's bed, the voice calling her name. What happens now? Peter looked at my mother. She did not answer. We stayed at Peter's house until morning. None of us slept properly. When daylight came, my mother said we had to go back. I thought she had lost her mind. Peter disagreed too, but she said something that made me understand. If we stay here, it comes here. She looked at Sarah. And I am not giving it another house. We returned shortly after sunrise. The front door was still open. Nothing appeared disturbed downstairs. The dining table remained where we had left it. The chairs were still stacked nearby. We walked upstairs together. The forbidden door was closed. The chain was hanging loose. My mother picked it up. Then she did something I never expected. She unlocked the door. Sarah stepped backward. I wanted to stop her. But after everything we had learned, I also knew we could not spend the rest of our lives protecting a door without understanding how the story ended. My mother opened it. The room was almost empty. Dust covered the floor. Old wallpaper peeled from the walls. A child's bed frame stood against one side. There were no monsters. No figures waiting in the darkness. Nothing moved. In the center of the room sat the doll. Red yarn hair. Blue dress. Small cloth hands resting in its lap. It looked old and completely harmless. Sarah began crying. That's what Emily was holding. My mother told her not to move closer. Then she took a cardboard box from the hallway. She placed the doll inside. Peter had given her instructions before we left. We were not going to destroy it. We were not going to take it somewhere else. We were going to remove everything else from the room. Emily's remaining belongings, old furniture, photographs, anything connected to her childhood. My mother believed the mistake had always been treating the room as Emily's grave. For years, they had preserved everything exactly as it had been. The room had become a place where the family remembered her through fear. We spent the afternoon clearing it. The doll remained inside the sealed box. Nothing happened. No voices. No knocking. When the room was empty, my mother placed the box back in the center. Then she closed the door. But this time, she did not replace 3 locks. Only one. A simple lock. I asked why. She looked down the hallway. Because we spent years acting like that room was stronger than the rest of this house. I don't know whether she was right. I don't know whether what happened to Emily had a supernatural explanation. I don't know how the doll returned after being thrown away. I don't know what my father experienced before the crash. Some questions never received answers. But something did change after that day. The voices stopped. Sarah never heard Emily again. The music box melody never returned. The chain never came loose. Years later, Sarah and I both moved away. Our mother eventually sold the house. Before she did, I went upstairs one last time. The hallway looked smaller than I remembered. The forbidden door was still there. I unlocked it. The room was empty. The box was gone. My mother had removed it before the sale. I asked her where she had taken the doll. She never told me. She only said, "It isn't in the house." For a long time, I thought that answer should have frightened me. Instead, I realized something. For most of my childhood, the worst part of that room was not what was behind the door. It was everything we were never allowed to know. My father. The accident. The reason we never moved. The reason my mother checked the locks every night. Secrets had made the room larger than it really was. Fear had filled every space where an explanation should have been. And although I still don't know what happened to that doll after we left the house, I know one thing with certainty. Sarah never heard the voice again. Neither did I. And my mother never returned to the room at the end of the hallway. Sometimes, years later, Sarah and I still talk about that house. We argue about what was real. She believes the voice belonged to Emily. I don't. I think whatever spoke to us knew enough about our family to become whatever we were most likely to answer. Maybe that was the reason our father gave us one rule that mattered more than all the others. If someone you love is gone, and you hear their voice coming from somewhere they cannot possibly be, do not answer. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing is not hearing a voice in the dark. It is hearing exactly the voice you were hoping would come back.